Hello out there on the internet, and welcome to Movies Are Boring. This is the only web show on the internet where two defense reporters sit and talk about the movies and pop culture. My name is Matthew Gault. With me, as always, is my co-host Kevin Knodell, the man, the myth, who's growing his beard back after some upsetting costume choices at Halloween. Glad to see.
How much that bothered you? I'm very sorry.
It disturbed me greatly. It disturbed me so much that I shaved mine off, and now I'm not happy with it. It's been a mess over here since you cut your beard. Today, Kevin and I are going to be discussing the 1988 cult classic, The Beast, or The Beast of War, depending on what part of the world you're in, which is a movie about a Soviet tank crew lost in Afghanistan in 1981. So this is at the height of the Soviet Union's conflict with Afghanistan in the 80s, and it's very good. I really liked this movie a lot. Kevin, what did you think of it? What were your initial thoughts?
I really liked it too. I mean, there were some very movie moments that kind of cropped up in the action every once in a while that were kind of, but I mean, overall, I thought it was very good. I think that whole part where he was shouting, "Toss me the rocket! Toss me the RPG!"
Yeah, that was ridiculous. We'll get to that in a moment. But just to kind of lay out the groundwork about what this movie is. So Fury came out. Have you seen Fury yet? You still haven't seen it?
I'm sorry, dude.
You're remiss. That's the whole reason we're watching this, because we're on it. Like, I'm on a tank kick now. So Fury came out, movie with Brad Pitt, tanks, World War II, fantastic. And I started kind of looking around for other tank films. There's not a lot of them. This is one that I saw in a couple different lists that is something very good, and it is. And so it's, like I said, it's 1981. Soviet Union's invading Afghanistan. There's a tank crew, and they get lost in a valley. They get lost in a valley after they have done some horrible things to one specific tribe out there. And so the tribe kind of bands together, and they're hunting this Soviet tank crew in this valley in Afghanistan. And it's cool. One of the things I thought was really cool about this film is that there's not. I think it would be easy to say that there's a protagonist, but I didn't feel like there was. You know, I feel like we got equal screen time with both the Soviet tank crew and with the Afghanis, and we got the motivations behind both. And it would be easy to depict the Russians as kind of these faceless monsters, and in some places they do, but it's more nuanced than that. There's people that are in that tank that are not happy with what's going on, right?
Well, even the monstrous characters have motivations and life experience for being monstrous. Nobody in this is really a one-dimensional character.
No, which for a movie from the 80s is impressive,
Yeah, and I'm actually kind of surprised I'd never heard of this movie before, because there's actually like a lot of semi-recognizable faces in this movie. There's a Baldwin in this movie.
Yeah, there's a Stephen Baldwin, one of the lesser Baldwins, is one of the...
In this movie, I mean, he's not terrible in this movie, but it's very clear that he's a lesser Baldwin.
Absolutely. Is he the one that's drinking... He's on the Soviet tank crew. Is he the one that's...
He's the screechy, wimpy one.
Okay, he wasn't the one that was drinking the brake fluid?
No. That was one of the other ones, but no. He was the one who was begging for his life and was very scared a lot.
Yeah, and he'd been wounded, and he had the patch on his head for most of the film.
Right.
For the back half of the film. Jason Patric is kind of the good... I'd like to say good-hearted Russian, but that's not even really accurate. Just kind of the non-asshole Russian. Jason Patric, who people remember from The Lost Boys as... he's the main Lost Boy, right? He's the center of that film. That's what everyone remembers him for. But he was pretty good in this. Who else did you notice? Did you see?
Um, his name escapes me right now, but their interpreter.
Oh yeah, yeah. If you give me a second, I'll tell you.
He's one of the four people who Hollywood calls to play Arabs.
Yeah, Eric Avari,
Yeah.
who people will probably remember from The Mummy. He was the original Mummy. He's one of the
He,
professors that gets eaten by the bugs.
yeah, he was the museum curator or
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, he was very. I felt bad for him. He was very.
Well, no, and that was actually a character that I really appreciated, the pro-Soviet Afghan, and it would have been really easy to paint him as just sort of this sniveling collaborator. He's not at all. He's a fully formed character in his own right who wants to bring modernity to Afghanistan and has his own motivations for doing what he does. Um, it would have been really easy to go a way different direction with that character.
That's kind of one of the really interesting aspects of this movie is that you have like I can like you look at it on the surface, and this is like people. I think you look at the box and you kind of read what it's about, and you're like, okay, I know this is like going to be a dumb action movie that's gonna like I'm gonna watch it, and all these characters are gonna be archetypes, and it'll be fun, but it'll be like Red Scorpion. I kept thinking about Red Scorpion that we reviewed, the Dolph Lundgren movie that we reviewed a couple,
And,
a month or two
also
ago.
Rambo 3.
Yeah, and Rambo 3, which also takes place in Afghanistan. But like every time that you think that this movie, that The Beast, is going to be one-dimensional and crappy, it surprises you. And like you said, the Soviet tank crew has an Afghan with them who's their interpreter. And you learn that he thinks that, like you said, he's interested in bringing his country into the 21st century, and that's why he's doing this. 20th century. I apologize. The 20th century. And that's why he's with the Soviets. That's why he's doing this, because he sees them. There's going to be pain and suffering now, but eventually everything will even out, and he'll know how to speak Russian, and he'll be good with computers. And it doesn't go well for him, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
Did you read about where this came from? Did you know it was a play? It's based on a play.
Yeah, Japanese one, right? I didn't get a lot of.
No, no, no. He's not. He has a. He's an interesting character. He has a Japanese name. Because I'm a former theater kid when I was in high school. I've read some of his plays before. His name is William Mastrosimone. I'm butchering that, I'm sure, but I don't know much about his biography, but he was in Afghanistan in 1986, and he got the inspiration for this play because he saw Mujahideen capture a Soviet tank crew and execute them in front of him. And he had this idea that if the Pashto people have this idea, and I'm gonna butcher this word, of if someone asks for
Sanctuary.
succor, so if somebody it's the Pashto word for sanctuary. If someone asks for sanctuary, it has to be given to them, and you see this in Lone Survivor, right? When in the movie when Mark Wahlberg rolls down the cliff into the Pashto tribe. He asks for help, and they give it to him, and they defend him.
Mm-hmm.
And so this playwright, when he's in Afghanistan, he's seeing the Soviet tank crew executed. He says, "What if these people who had so horribly mistreated the Pashto, if one of them asked for sanctuary, what would happen?" And that forms kind of one of the pivotal moments in this movie. There's one of the tank crew, Constantine, who's played by Jason Patric, who is not super. He's questioning command, essentially. He's insubordinate, and they leave him to die.
He's a free thinker.
He's a free thinker, as his tank commander accuses him. He absolutely is.
Yeah.
He's tied to a rock by his buddies and left to die. And when the Pashto show up, and they're about to kill him, he remembers the Pashto word for sanctuary because he was taught it by the interpreter earlier. He says it over and over again, and they take him in. And I thought that was interesting it's a really interesting concept for a movie and for a play. And I would have really liked to have. This was an off-Broadway piece, apparently, that was pretty successful, obviously, because it got turned into a movie. And I
Mhm.
kept thinking while I was watching it, how do you do this on stage?
Very differently than they did it on screen, I'm guessing.
Yeah, I would imagine because you've got tanks rolling around the desert. I assume I haven't read the script, but being a theater person, what I imagine that they do is you have two sides of the theater or two sides of the stage, and one represents the desert and the Pashto people, and the other one's the interior of the tank, and you just have the lights go on and off in one area. Does that make sense?
Makes sense to me.
That's the only
That'd
way
be a
that
way
they
to
could
do
pull it
it.
off. Yeah. Um, but did you read? And another interesting thing about the production is that your buddy, your
They'll die,
buddy, yeah, he's the military advisor on this.
which is not surprising because everything, pretty much, particularly post platoon during that era, he was on everything. But it was definitely interesting reading Dale Dye's reflections on working on this movie.
And
'Cause
you've interviewed Dale Dye before, correct? And
I,
will you tell kind of our audience who may not know who Dale Dye is and what your impressions of him are?
yeah, Dale Dye is basically Hollywood's military consultant. Definitely the best known and most sought out military consultant in show business. He is a former Marine, was a combat correspondent during the Vietnam War, and was, I think, a company commander in Lebanon shortly before the bombing of the barracks. And he got his big start being Ollie Stone's advisor. I mean, more
Did you
advisor for the
did you
cast than
call him Ollie Stone?
I did. People say it
Okay.
sometimes. Anyway, yeah, he was Oliver Stone's go-to guy for military stuff while he made Platoon. And that movie just happened to be so violent and raw and just so different from the way war movies had been made before that. And a lot of that was due to both Stone's experiences and Dye's experiences being poured into the movie and put into the movie that he was then able to kind of create his own consultancy firm, Warriors Inc., which pops up a lot in the credits of military movies. I mean, that's kind of his background. In terms of, and actually this does factor into, I think, one of his philosophies and something that I did talk to him about, which is the notion that not everyone in war is a hero.
Right.
Because he really, which isn't to say that he doesn't, because he's obviously very proud of his service and he likes to present the military in a mostly positive way, but he doesn't like just unreasonably unreal depictions of soldiers as either saints or killers. He likes them to be presented as people.
He doesn't want the John Wayne war movies. You
No.
know? Yeah. No Green Berets.
And I think that really, I mean, I don't know how the original play was written, so I don't know how these characters were originally written, but I think their portrayal, I think that shows a lot in this movie. It's interesting to me that, like, the Russians, I think, are presented in a complicated sort of way, but even the Mujahideen.
Yeah, they're not unified, right? There's conflict even among the Mujahideen. You know.
Yeah. And you see different ways of doing things, and it's like they're not. This isn't like Rambo 3, where this is about them fighting for democracy against tyranny. More, they're actually fighting for family honor. I mean, there is their whole rebellion that they're kind of part of, but this is very much a
This
fight for
is
personal honor and a very personal vendetta more than being part of the wider struggle. I mean, until kind of the end.
well, no, this is Badal, right? This is revenge because
Yeah.
they came in and they killed like a large portion of their tribe. People, family died. Um, the portrayal of the Russians, I think, was interesting. Let's get into um, the tank commander, the Soviet tank commander, Tank Boy,
Yeah.
as he's called.
Well, no,
So,
and that's why he is an interesting character as Tank Boy. What you learn about the Tank Commander is that when he was 8 years old, he basically was a child soldier in Stalingrad. He's you would look at him and think he was too young to fight in World War II, except for if he were a child soldier, he would have been the right age to fight in World War II. And the Eastern Front was such a brutal, bloody, miserable war that child soldiers would not have been uncommon. And I think that really some people don't really remember when you think about things that the Soviets did during the Cold War, what their experience during World War II was that led them to think in those terms. They had a very harsh worldview and a very harsh way of looking at warfare.
right. So this tank commander is. You spend the first half of the movie just kind of thinking that he's a crazy, and he is a crazy bastard. He's relentless. He's very cruel. And when it kind of comes to when you start to get his background, and he's accusing the younger generation of not giving enough and being selfish, almost coming short of like saying that they're westernized. I kind of thought,
Mm-hmm.
and he starts telling them about his experience when he was 8 years old defending Stalingrad, and they would tie a rope around him and lower him onto tanks, and it was that, like you said, the Eastern Front was so brutal and it was total war, and of course, an 8-year-old boy that was doing that is going to grow up to be this tank commander, this kind of I almost kind of thought of him as Captain Ahab like figure, you know,
I actually didn't make that connection, but he's absolutely a Captain Ahab.
because
uh,
there's that moment that really struck home for me is these guys they're lost, they're out of fuel, they're running out of water and supplies, and they finally get to where they think the road to Kandahar is, and there's a big huge cliff in front of them, they can't get to it. Then miraculously a rescue helicopter shows up, and they're like, great, we'll take you guys home, we'll take you guys back to Kandahar, we'll shell your tank and then we'll be out of here. The commander's like, whoa, wait, we're not shelling the tank. Just give us supplies, we'll turn around, and we'll get out of this valley. And forces all of his men to get back in the tank. And, just in this mad pursuit of I very Captain Ahab-like obsession with preserving the tank and getting it back home. That was his goal, even if it was crazy, and even if it cost ultimately the lives of him and his men.
everybody in I think everybody in this movie is motivated by pride above anything else.
Yeah, I mean, even Jason Patrick, who's ostensibly the hero of the
Well,
film,
no,
is
when he decides to help the Mujahideen, it's not because he supports their cause so much. It's because he looks at his wrists and he remembers that his
yeah.
commander left him to die, and you can hear the anger in his voice when he says, "Yeah, I'll do that."
Yeah, so after the Pashtu rescue Jason Patrick, Constantine, they have an RPG. They ask him to fix it, and he fixes it. And they're like, "You will make the tank explode." He's like you said. He looks at his wrist and he's like, "Yes, yes, I will." And it's at this point again that this movie subverts tropes, because you think that this is going to be like a Dances with Wolves or a Red Scorpion or an Avatar, where he's going to get integrated into the tribe and he's going to get married, and like at the end of the movie he'll stay. But that's not what happens. He blows up the tank, or he shoots the tank, and it doesn't. That was another great thing. We're totally going to spoil this movie for you, but we always do. That's why you love us, right?
Yeah.
So he shoots the tank. They go through that whole rigmarole where they're trying to get. Okay, first of all, let's talk about that, because I know that irritated me too. They get one guy's got the RPG. Jason Patrick's got the RPG, but he doesn't have the ammo for it. And his buddy, the Khan of the Pashto people, is like across the path, looking at him, dumbstruck, as Constantine is saying, give me the rocket launcher," and he keeps doing this motion, like, "Give me the rocket, I need the rocket." And Khan is just looking at him like, "I don't know what you're talking about. You know, you've got the rocket, you shoot the tank now. You don't need the ammunition." Is that kind of what you were talking about? That it was irritating you?
Well, no, their solution is what irritated me.
That he threw the rocket?
Through the rocket. You
Yeah.
do not throw ordnance like that. I mean, you don't throw a rocket.
No. Yeah. No. I
Like,
that struck me
no,
as
like no,
well.
that part, no, the part before that, like the problem made sense to me. That would
Okay.
make me mad. Um, like even in desperate situations, the idea that you would throw like that was a long distance to throw a rocket. Like I could understand being reckless enough to like toss the rocket like maybe 10 feet, which again would be a really dangerous, really dumb thing to do. Like we're talking about explosive ordnance
Yeah.
here.
It's a weapon that's going to be able to take out that tank, and you're going to huck it. You know. Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
Bad
that,
times.
and I'm not sure. Like I would love to know what Dale Dye thought about that scene because I know that he has a strong influence on the movies that he works on, but every once in a while there'll be a scene that needs to be put in there for dramatic purposes, and he's not always happy with some of those moments. And I mean that was once like there were some moments that were very like while they were chasing the tank and they were dodging bullets that was very
Movie. Yeah.
action. And that but I mean I just kind of accepted that. But I broke down and I laughed when they threw the rocket. Like that was really stupid. But overall, like it wasn't stupid enough that I hate this movie
Yeah.
at all.
It doesn't break it. Yeah.
This is too good of a movie for a moment like that to break it down.
So Jason Patrick gets the rocket, stuffs it in there, takes aim, fires, hits the tank, but he hits the barrel. The tank's not disabled. He destroys their barrel, but they were out of ammunition anyway, right? They didn't have any more high explosive rounds or anything. Um, and so then they're just, what are we supposed to do? And then there's past two women that were also chasing the tank around because they were upset as well. And they had a bunch of grenades. They set off the grenades. The grenades smash into the tank. It's disabled. The Soviets all get out. And then you would think that as this movie is resolving, that Constantine is going to go with, he's like, if this were any other like crappy action movie, crappy Hollywood movie, he would be integrated into the tribe and become part of the Pashtu people. And they try to get him to come, but what happens is another Soviet rescue helicopter comes and starts picking everybody up, and Constantine goes with the Russians because those are his people. And I kept thinking like, that's not going to go well for him when he gets home, right? Because the other guys are still alive. The other people that were in that tank crew are still alive. They weren't killed. The tank commander was killed horribly, but like Stephen Baldwin and the other guy are alive. They're
Yeah.
not. They're going to tell the story when they get back, and they're going to say that Constantine helped destroy the tank. He's going to go to a Soviet prison, right? Like that's going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, you can look at it that way. I mean, it's very possible. He also did leave with a musket.
I thought that was that not that really long sniper rifle? Like is it the Druganov? Is that what they're called?
No, that was I think that was actually a musket,
Okay.
old Afghan musket, and they did use those during Soviet invasion. Some of the Mujahideen did use those. Yeah, these were not well armed Mujahideen.
No, they were not.
No Stinger. Yeah, none of those Stinger missiles or Western backing for these guys.
Well, again, this was 1981, right? So this was before
Oh yeah,
this is before the Stinger missiles started showing up.
yeah. But even so, these guys did not have a lot of weapons to use. But I mean, I think by that time in the story, I think the rest of the crew was far more. Even at that point, I think the crew was more afraid of their commander than of than of the Mujahideen.
Oh no, absolutely. But I
So
still think that
in terms of what story they would tell when they get back, I mean, I think the bigger story that they would tell is our commander went crazy. He just went bonkers crazy, and we're alive.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, it's just kind of.
it'll be one of those story like what happens in Afghanistan stays in Afghanistan, that kind of thing. You think?
I think that's kind of that's the impression I got of kind of the direction they were going with that ending. But and
Uh,
obviously, the commander doesn't get to tell his side of the story because
okay, so
which was a great way to end that plot.
oh my God, it was so that was amazing. So Constantine essentially convinces the Mujahideen to let the tank crews go, and they kind of they pillage them. They take their stuff, they take their boots and everything, um, and they're walking away. And the tank commander's kind of lagging behind, and the female Pashtu who had also been chasing had been wanting revenge. One of them witnessed the tank roll over her husband, like crushing him. So she's just furious. Her and her like this group of them get together. They've all got rocks and they descend on the tank commander. And then you just see her walking up with his like she's just covered in his blood, smiling, just so happy, transcendently happy. She's carrying his boots. That was that was a beautiful shot, right? Of her covered in the blood, and a really a good way to end to like in a very Hollywood way bring that character to justice, yet not sour a lot of the other things that the film was doing and doing so well.
Well, no, I mean there was something, and I like that it tied to the Kipling quote at the beginning because the movie
Yeah,
opens up with a quote from Kipling.
which was his famous poem about I think it's like to a soldier dying in Afghanistan.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'm looking it up. A young British soldier, I think is just what it's called. Yeah, because Britain also was once in Afghanistan, and it went as bad as well for them as it does for anybody that tries to invade Afghanistan. But anyway, yes. So yeah, it ties back into that quote from the beginning of the movie. So we kind of come full circle and close. Did you read the Dale how Dale Dye got the tanks?
I did, and that is amazing. But I'll let you explain that.
Okay, so they used two T-55 tanks to film this movie, which they're Russian tanks, correct?
They are,
Soviet tanks.
and that is one thing that is rare in a lot of these movies. They actually had Soviet tanks.
Yeah, so the tanks that they use in the film are actually T-55 Soviet tanks that were used by Egypt and were captured by Israel. And so this film is all filmed in Israel. And so the way they got the tanks is Dale Dye had some connections with the Israeli Defense Force from his active duty days, and then met with a bunch of them in Tel Aviv over in a bar, and they drank and negotiated the production company buying these two tanks. So he's written a little bit about this. He says that he felt like an international arms dealer, and he was like
At its very core, yeah, that is what just happened there. Like,
yeah, any other purpose that those tanks are being used for besides being filmed in a movie, that's a scary scenario.
Yeah.
The other really cool story that he tells is, did you see the one where he wanted the tanks to have recoil when they fired?
And that was a really cool way to do that. What they did was they obviously weren't going to use live munitions while making a movie because that's dangerous and insane. I mean, he has a reputation for being really hard on actors and being kind of insane and putting them into this war fever. But he's not going to detonate like live
Right.
explode while making a movie. But he wanted to make it so that you felt the recoil of the tank firing, because that was just something that didn't really happen in movies. Like movies, like tanks would just shoot rounds and not really do the whole recoil thing. It's a much more violent experience actually firing a gun like that. So what they did was they filled rounds that they put in there with a certain amount of water to give it the weight, so that the gun would respond to it. I mean, I don't know all the technical details of how that would work, but that is
It was a 90 millimeter shell, I think, and they got it. They used just enough water so it was the exact same weight as the high explosive round.
yeah, and that's a lot of ingenuity there. That's a real cool way to do that.
Yeah, I thought just that's because when those guns fire in this movie, like that tank looked real, and that whole tank like shivers and shakes, and it feels very impactful in a way that in most tank movies it's just kind of floating around, it's just piff piff. Not so in this. It was another kind of little small touch that made this movie way better than I thought it was going to be. This movie was surprisingly good. Were there any other little I think you said you had some nitpicks, complaints. Was there anything else that stood out that you didn't
I mean,
like?
that rocket was really the big one.
Okay.
I mean, there were other moments that didn't, like the helicopter crew looking for water didn't make a lot of sense to me. They're in a
No.
helicopter; they can go back to base. Like they don't need to find water.
Yeah, that's a good. I didn't even consider that. That's a good point. And why you would think with as fast acting as that poison is that maybe one of them would have died, but not all of them.
Yeah, I mean maybe that's that. Knowing that this is based on like on a play,
A stage play, yeah.
that that whole thing does sound much more like something that would have happened in a play,
Hmm.
like something that's and something that I would have accepted on stage because it's a more artistic, less literal translation of what's going on.
Right.
But there, it just seemed very strange that a helicopter crew would do that, and that they would just all get down, like just find a lake and land and get water in the middle of a war zone because they were just that thirsty. That
Uh,
makes a lot of sense to me. But I mean, that's a nitpick thing. The other thing, and this wouldn't have happened, but like realistically, they probably wouldn't have been using as many T-55 tanks. This crew would probably have a T-72 or something. Like
right. I think
that's
that
that's
there's
that's,
some,
that's a reasonable expectation.
yeah, because they're not gonna get one.
No, I mean you can get one now real easy. But I mean it is very cool that they were actually using mostly Russian gear and Russian equipment.
Yeah, all of the small arms were also Russian too. I noticed that.
But
Right.
that's not as difficult to pull off. And AK-47s were very common in 80s cinema. I
No,
will.
but
This one thing about it though, in terms of authenticity, it was interesting. I mean, they did it so they could get some more top billed actors, but the fact that they were all speaking in American accents and they didn't like. Not only were they not speaking Russian, they were just straight on talking like they were Americans.
um, I'm okay with that, and here's
Uh,
why.
I mean I'm okay with it too, but it is interesting to me.
Yeah, but I think you can when you have a situation like that, there's a couple different ways you can go. Like you can do what they did in this, which is just have American accents. We'll say you're Soviets, it's fine. And I would like to point out that the Mujahideen all spoke Pashto. I don't know how well because they were all Cuban and Indian actors, um, but they did speak Pashto.
Yeah,
Um, but yeah, the Soviets don't speak Russian. So you can either do that, you can either have them just speak American, you can have them try to bumble through Russian. I can't imagine what it would be like to teach Stephen Baldwin all of his lines in Russian.
and that's why I was okay with it because that would not have
Right, or you could have them do the accents, have Russian accents, which I always think is kind of weird when they do that in films.
It's always really dumb.
Yeah, the one that bothers me the most when they have this kind of thing is when you have like European countries in movies. No matter what European country it is,
They have,
everyone's got. Sorry, go ahead.
and they just give them British accents.
Everyone's got a British accent. Like I'm playing this video game Assassin's Creed Unity right now, which is a great game, but it's set in Revolutionary era France. Everyone's got a British accent. Everybody.
They
And it's huh?
they speak foreign.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what that means when people do that.
British accents in other countries is just generic foreigner.
Right.
But yeah, I mean that's a little weird in this movie, but I think they kind of they did it in such a way that you don't notice it really, you know.
You notice it at the beginning, but it becomes less noticeable over time as they become characters and not actors as you get into the story.
Yeah,
And I think in some ways it also helps you. It breaks down the barrier of they're Russians immediately and makes them just. I mean, at least for American audiences, makes them sound and act like someone that they would know like
yeah,
immediately.
you're able to empathize with those characters more readily because there's not that abstraction of language that's keeping you away. Um, that's a good point.
Which is, and that's also big since the Cold War wasn't over when this movie was made.
Yeah, that's another aspect. This came out in 1988, right? That's another aspect I hadn't considered. But this is a Cold War era film. And I mean, it portrays Russians doing some nasty, nasty shit, but also it's not completely unsympathetic to them either. You know, and there's not very many movies, and like this movie did not do well at the box office, and I'm thinking
And it
that's
would
probably
have
why.
done worse if they actually spoke Russian.
Oh, it would have done far worse. But I'm thinking that if you 19 that kind of environment, you release a movie that's a more complicated, more nuanced portrayal of Russians, that it's not going to do as well. Because at that point we were, it's all Red Dawn, that
Yeah.
kind of thing. Go Wolverines, etc. Um, well, I think, sir, that just about covers it, unless you've got something else you'd like to say about the amazing cult classic The Beast, which everyone should absolutely watch.
No, I don't think I got anything else. I'm really glad you recommended this one.
Yeah, no, I happened to stumble upon it on the internet on a list while I was doing some Fury research, and yeah, this kind of knocked my socks off. It's available on DVD. It's still in print on DVD. You can buy it on Amazon. You can also watch it on Amazon Instant Video if you'd like that. It's not on Netflix, unfortunately, but for those of you who are willing to pay a couple bucks to watch it, it's fantastic, and I absolutely recommend it. For movies are boring, and for war is boring. My name is Matthew Gault. With me, as always, is Kevin Knodell. Say goodbye, Kevin.
Goodbye, Kevin.
And we will see you.
Every time. It's not that funny.
I don't know. It reminds me of Burns and Gracie, and something my parents watched when I was a kid, and I think it's funny. I'm sorry. Um, we will see you next time with another war movie that you should watch or avoid, depending on our whims. Good night.